Today we're diving into something I call the powerless pen. We're going to look at what happens when some of history's biggest names are at their absolute weakest. Yeah, we're talking about their secret insecurities. You know, we think of these people as giants, right? Conquerors, geniuses, people who bent the world to their will. But what were they actually afraid of? When the crowds were gone and they were all alone, what was that one thing that kept them staring at the ceiling all night?
Well, it turns out the answer is hiding in plain sight, in their private letters. And honestly, what you find is kind of shocking. The second they were away from the public eye with a pen in their hand, these larger-than-life figures could sound, well, pretty pathetic. Their letters just strip away the legend and show you this raw vulnerability that history has almost completely forgotten.
Okay, so our first case study is, you can't get much bigger than this. Napoleon Bonaparte. Military genius, emperor of France, the whole deal. But let's pull back the curtain on the man behind that fancy title. And right away, the difference is just, whoa. Publicly, he's the conqueror of Europe, this unmatched strategic genius. But in private, in his letters to his wife, Josephine, it's like a completely different person shows up. He's not commanding armies, he's literally begging for her attention, desperate for love. It's almost like the same insane ambition that fueled his conquests also made him terrified of losing control in his personal life. Just listen to this. He writes to her, "I await you. I am engulfed in you. Without you, I no longer have a life." Come on, those are not the words of an emperor who's got his world on a string. Those are the words of a guy whose entire identity feels like it's about to collapse just because one person isn't there. The pen wasn't just a tool for him. It was a mirror showing his deepest, most fragile dependency. All right, let's switch gears. From the battlefield to the concert hall. If a conqueror's biggest insecurity was all about control, what about a creative genius? What did he fear? So let's take a look at the one and only Ludwig von Beethoven. So we all know the story of Beethoven, right? The musical titan, the revolutionary composer who wrote some of the most beautiful music ever, even after he went deaf. But his private writing? It tells a totally different story. A story not about power, but about this deep, unresolved longing and emotional chaos. And it all revolves around this one mysterious person he called his immortal beloved. And this quote from that famous letter, man, it's just heartbreaking. He writes, "My angel, my all, my very self. Can our love endure except through sacrifices, through not demanding everything?" See how different that is from Napoleon's demands? Beethoven is just full of these tormented questions. It's the sound of a genius wrestling with the love he's convinced he can never truly have.
And here's the kicker. The letter was never sent. It didn't fix anything. It didn't resolve a thing. It just exists. It's like a perfect monument to his private pain, this enduring mystery that holds all the personal anguish of a man whose music brought so much joy to everyone else.
Okay, for our last example, we've got a man who was an absolute master of public performance, right up until it all came crashing down. I'm talking about the brilliant and ultimately tragic Oscar Wilde. And his story, it shows us something new, what love looks like in the aftermath. Wilde was the social icon, the celebrated wit. He perfected that role. But his most powerful, most profound writing didn't come from a fancy London salon. It came from a prison cell. And in there, his pen wasn't writing clever plays anymore. It was documenting his own tragic fall, trying to make sense of what he called love as aftermath, the complete ruin that came after his passion. In his famous prison letter, De Profundis, he wrote with this brutal honesty that his public persona just never would have allowed. You get lines like this one. "The supreme vice is shallowness." You can just feel it, right? This is a man who's been forced to look at the deepest, hardest truths about himself. The cleverness is gone, and what's left is this painful wisdom you can only get from losing absolutely everything.
So, what does all this tell us? What's the thread connecting the desperate emperor, the lonely genius, and the fallen icon? Well, it's a concept I like to call ambition's amplifier.
Let's just recap real quick. For Napoleon, it was that gnawing fear of losing personal control. For Beethoven, a whole lifetime of unresolved longing. And for Wilde, it was the tragic aftermath of love. And this all leads us to this big idea, ambition's amplifier.
Here's the thing. Huge ambition doesn't get rid of your personal insecurities. Nope. It actually magnifies them. It's like the same drive that pushed them to conquer Europe, or revolutionize music, or become a literary giant. That same drive also cranked up the volume on their personal fears and desires, making the stakes of their private lives feel astronomically high.
So it's really a pretty consistent pattern when you look at it. Step 1, you have their immense public power, the stuff history remembers. Step 2, their private letters crack open the door to their hidden insecurities and fears. And step 3, the pen itself becomes the tool that reveals this massive, amplified gap between the legend and the actual person.
And maybe that's the real point of all this. You strip away the empires, the symphonies, the fame, and what do you have left? You find that the most powerful people in history were, at the end of the day, just people, driven by the exact same hopes, fears, and desperate needs for connection that drive the rest of us. Their ambition just put it all on a much, much bigger stage.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. If this is the kind of secret, vulnerable stuff that history's giants were willing to write down, what remains unwritten in our own lives? If you had a powerless pen, what would it have to say?